talked a couple times this weekend about how, looking back, you feel that you recognize all these mistakes and how you were developing as a writer. Specifically, what are some of the things you feel that you see as you develop in writing that you're referring to?
Yeah. Well, the first thing you notice is just early on, you see even the basics. You see spelling mistakes that don't get corrected. You see obvious grammar mistakes. You see apostrophes that are missing or shouldn't be there. But more than that, like first of all, structure. Like early on, there's a lot of rambling. A lot of articles refer to things I'm going to do that never happened. And because I didn't think carefully about what I was saying. A lot of the time, like you'll see titles that imply things that don't really happen. You'll see articles that aren't really well thought out in terms of exactly what they should and shouldn't cover. And all of that stuff gets dramatically better as you see it. So the first half, a lot of them are very haphazard. There's a lot of wasted space or stuff that's not supposed to be there. Like, it took me a long time to learn not to make things as large as possible. A long time to learn about what shouldn't be there. And that's probably not until Volume 2. But the biggest changes are done by halfway through Volume 1, where you see someone who actually now can write in a way that doesn't set off my alarm bells of like, no, all the time. If I don't just sit back and relax. But there's also a lot of insight there. And also, like, you have to recognize a lot of the naivete. Like, I was reading, like, one of the things that really struck me, that I don't think I talked about in the book, was the articles on Suicide Brown, the Tinker deck that I built for Chicago. And I had just come off a really intensive pro tour in New Jersey. And I built what I thought was a really great deck, and I still think it's a really great deck. Alan Comer top 8 with it, and it had a really good record. But after I lost, I went to, I think, 2 and 3. After that happened, I wrote about the deck, and I said, I don't want to talk about what happened to me, I want to talk about the deck. And things just didn't break right, that's okay. And at the time, I was really proud of myself, and I think I was right to be, for not harping on it, not making excuses, not trying to explain why I didn't win. But at the same time, when I think back on that weekend, I know, same way I look back on this weekend, that I wasn't quite there. That I didn't have that intense, like, I'm going to get every last decision right. I'm going to play every last card exactly the way it should be played. And I'm going to get every win I can. And I didn't have it that weekend, and I don't know why. But it wasn't there. Like, it was during testing. During testing, I got the deck exactly right. And somehow I lost that focus that weekend. And I don't know if I could have made day 2 anyway, but I definitely let that happen to me. And this weekend, I didn't spend the time on draft early on. But also, you can just tell sort of when you're really dialed in. And I wasn't. I mean, the deck, again, I worked really hard on the deck. I thought the deck was really good. And it doesn't mean I think I played badly, right? But I hold myself to the highest standard of all, which is you should play the best anyone can play, or at least the best that you could possibly play. And I didn't reach that level this weekend. I wasn't really necessarily trying, because it's not easy to get there, but, when you show up this time, you would like to be there. It'd be great if you could turn it on and off and just, like, go back to your normal life and then suddenly be in the zone. But, sort of post-traumatic suggestion, I don't think that's possible.
Sure. As you were going back through all this work that you've done previously, were there certain pieces, decks, experiences that struck you again as being very critical, or things that you felt were very important, either sentimentally or from a tournament development standpoint?
Yeah. First of all, Turbo Zvi. Like, the first row article struck me as very, very important. Just because, I made what's kind of an 18-year-old punk move when I called the deck Turbo Zvi, but it turned out to work out really well. Because, first of all, it was one of the few decks where you could actually justify putting your name on it, because it was so unique, and because it's the kind of deck that I am confident that no one else would have gotten there. Like, if you replay time 10 times, I don't think I get there very often. I think it was very fortunate that I got the deck exactly right. Because, like, if you don't get a lot of the way there, or somehow get to a path where you think you're onto something, you just don't get there. And then I happened to get the deck list exactly right, I think, on the first try. And then I wrote it up, and that made a name for me. And after that, like, I had a lot of respect. I got to touch with a lot of pros. That led, like, directly to New Jersey and working with Mod Squad, for example. Although there were other things that also helped out with that, but that was, and also it gave me so much confidence that I could do that I could build something like that and I could talk about it and people would really respect me. I didn't even know what was going to happen. Like, I emailed it to Frank, and then suddenly it says, in huge letters, new killer deck, Turbo Zvi. And I saw that. I was just like, oh my God, what's going on over here? You know, I had no idea. But also, the very first article that I wrote wasn't an article. We talk about this in the book. It was just, it was called Degeneracy. I was replying all to the Legion mailing list. And what I said was, there's basically these things that let you go completely nuts in various different ways. There's got to be something out there. And I listed 2 decks, and they were very raw off the top of my head. One of them was 58 cards, it turns out. But it turned out that I hit reply all. One of the people I sent it to was Frank Kismato. And he asked me, can I post this? I said, okay, sure. And suddenly I had something on the dojo. Like, and I wouldn't have thought that I could do that. I had no results. You know, I knew some people, but it was nothing. And then when I got an actually positive response to that, I thought, well, if I got a positive response, then imagine what else I can do. So that one was big for me. Turbo Zvi was big for me. There are certain lines that you notice. Like, I think Justin Gary, I'm not sure, pulled out the line that I said where I mentioned that right before Chicago, before the tournament before Tokyo, I decided I was going to top 8. And then I did, and then I got blown up by Kibler in the quarterfinals. And again, like, I look back on it, during the Swiss, I was there. In the quarterfinals, I wasn't quite there. I had mentally accepted that I was going to lose, because the matchup was so bad that I knew that there were certain things I couldn't beat, and I didn't quite do the best I could. Doesn't mean I think I could have won the match. I don't think I could have, but I could have made it more interesting, and certainly it's possible I could have forced Game 5, and then who knows. But, you know, somehow I just mentally thought my tournament was over. And then for Tokyo, I changed my tune. Like, I'm winning this thing. Period. That form was mine. And I don't know how I got there, but I got there. And then I did. And I was so tuned in. I have never been that tuned in. It was crazy. And it's looking back, sort of, you see how your attitude, the way you phrase things, the way you look at things, shaped what happened. And that's something you just don't notice early on. You don't notice before. Later on, I really like when I got into, like, I mean, you look at my fires itself, and I read it, and the funny thing about it is that article was damn good. I mean, that article really talks about detail and why things are going on and what roles cards have and how to play specific situations. It goes into lots and lots of very minute details that are actually important, and in looking back on it, it really teaches you how to play the deck and why the deck is the way it is and all of your options and how different choices influence other choices. And it's amazing how I got mocked for that so much. And that taught me a lot too, though, because, like, you learn that it's not necessarily the content that determines people's reaction. It's the presentation, often. That because it was presented in 7 parts, because it was perceived as absurdly long for what it was, people didn't understand what was there.